Wow. Oh, hey there. My name's Ross, and I'm a bit of a nerd for all things nature. So a while ago, I started a passion project called, Nerdy About Nature. It began as social media videos sharing cool fun facts and tidbits of wisdom about the natural world, and has since evolved into this podcast that you're tuning into here. This project serves as a means to inspire, educate, and engage folks with the outdoor world so that we can all become better stewards of it, and so that we can all work together to create a more inclusive, diverse, equitable, and just future for each and every one of us in this world that we all share. Because nature, it's pretty dang neat, you know? I think we should keep it that way. So come on, let's go get nerdy about nature.
Come and take a nature walk with me. We're gonna check out some really cool trees. We're gonna hang around and talk about all those things in nature that we can't live without. Let's go get nerdy, yeah, let's get nerdy about nature. Nerdy, yeah, let's get nerdy about nature, baby. Nerdy, yeah, let's get nerdy about nature. Come on, let's get nerdy about nature.
Oh, hello everybody. Welcome to the Nerdy About Nature podcast. Today I'm chatting with my good friend Sandy Ward. Sandy is from the Lil'wat Nation. She is a founding member of Indigenous Women Outdoors, and she works very closely with the Indigenous Life Sport Academy. So doing a lot of good work to carve out a path for more Indigenous women and kids to get into the outdoors in a safe, welcoming space. She is a snowboard instructor, a mountain bike coach, and an avid rock climber who enjoys spending her time outside and connecting to her traditional territory, seeing it all through a new perspective through sport. So her and I had a great conversation here talking about, what it was like for her growing up, getting into these activities, relationships with her community and these sports and how the two kind of interact, and her take on what consent means in working with Indigenous communities when it comes to building bike trails, skate parks, or bigger development in industries. So a really interesting convo, and I am stoked to share it all with you. Here we go. Well, welcome to the Nerdy About Nature podcast. Kilkalokik. We're sitting here currently on lands of the Squamish Ochmeoch. Would you like to start off by giving us a little bit of an introduction as to who you are?
Yeah. Well, my name is Sandy Ward. I'm actually from the Lil'wat Nation. Mm-hmm. My name, Kelkelokik, means the winter ptarmigan. Mm-hmm. So he's the ptarmigan that changes colors in the winter from speckled to white. And then he was also a transformer. So went around the world changing men and animals to stone to just instill a sense of morality into people, basically. So my uncle gave me this name because of the work that I do with Indigenous Women Outdoors and Indigenous Life Sport Academy. So it's just changing the way the industries, like the outdoor industry, kind of sees Indigenous people and getting more Indigenous people involved in sports and stuff.
So the ptarmigan's a transformer?
Yes.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
And that's where your name comes from?
Yeah.
Because then there's Sutik Maka?
Shutik Maka.
Yeah. What's that part of your name?
That's the snow blossom or snow flower. And yeah, that was also given to me. My uncle gave me 3 names. So Kelkelokik, Makachbakam, and Ishat. So Ishat's an ancestral name that's been in my family for generations. So,
right.
Yeah.
That's so rad. And that's a recent happening too, right?
Yeah, it's I guess going into 2 years almost that I got my names.
Right.
Yeah.
Because when we did that project up, out in the Duffy and around here, you had just received that, I believe. Was that 2 years ago?
Yeah, that was a while. Yeah.
For some reason, I had put that in my mind as even before COVID times, but I guess that was...
No, that was, it was during Fabric, filming for Fabric as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Man, time is such a crazy...
I
can't
know.
keep track of it.
It goes so fast.
Well, yeah, okay, so you're of Lil'wat Nation descent. We're out here on Squamish territory right now because you were hosting or being part of a climb for Indigenous Life Sport Academy.
Yes.
It's a pretty cool thing. Do you want to tell me about that and your role in that?
Yeah, so there's 3 of us that kind of lead the program for Indigenous Life Sport Academy. So we've got our climbing program, which is we meet every other week, and we just try to get kids out on ropes, on rocks, and a lot of it is just trying to get kids outside, connected to the land, and enjoying it in a different way, like climbing, mountain biking, all of these things that are maybe a little bit less accessible to Indigenous people. just because there's not a lot of representation within these industries. So it's a bit intimidating to get into these sports. But when you go out with us, you're surrounded by other Indigenous people, other like-minded Indigenous people. So it's really awesome for the kids to see us as leaders within that kind of industry. So it gives them, I guess, a sense of hope that, yeah, I can do this. I can get out and climb rocks too.
Right. And how do a lot of kids get access to this program?
We open it up to anybody from any nation. Mm-hmm. So we usually just post it on our social medias for Indigenous Life Sport Academy. And it's a lot of going around within the nation, like my nation, and just trying to round up kids.
Yeah.
Just get them stoked on climbing.
Yeah.
And sometimes that will involve, going to their house and picking them up.
Yeah. And it's not just climbing though. It's because it's what was it before? Before it was ILSA, it was the First Nations snowboard team.
Yeah.
Snowboard Association.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's snowboarding, it's biking, it's climbing, it's all this stuff. I'm familiar with it because I've been working with you all for years now. But if someone just listening to this has no idea what ILSA is, could you give them an intro to it?
So we put together unstructured sports. So it's not about contest. It's about just getting kids out and involved in sport, because sport it's so healthy and it's healing for us as a people. So to get out together and enjoy these sports as a group, not necessarily like team sports. So there's no contest. It's just getting the kids out and enjoying the outdoors, reconnecting them to the land and to nature.
And you've been part of that for 5-10 years now?
Since the beginning. 2005 was the First Nation snowboard team.
Right, because you started as a member.
Yeah, I joined the team in 2005, which was the first year. They trained me to get my snowboard instructing certifications. So I went through the level 1 and 2 with them, and I started volunteering as a coach for the team. And then they switched over to Indigenous Life Sport Academy a couple of years ago. And we just wanted to not stop at just snowboarding. So now we're snowboarding, skiing, we're mountain biking and climbing, skateboarding, basically any sport. We'll try to get a program going if we have time.
I know Court wanted to get golf going at one point.
Yeah.
I was like, interesting.
That's a random one.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, and it's such an awesome program to see it in my short time and experience seeing it, especially the past year or two, it's really boomed. I feel like there's been a lot of funding going in. There's a lot of attention going towards it, a lot more kids involved. What's it like for you, having started in it, growing up now and becoming a very central leader in this kind of movement to get kids outdoors? How's that feel?
I love where it brought me in my life, and everything that I have right now is thanks to the First Nation snowboard team. And I honestly don't know what I would be doing if it weren't for that team. So I've gotten into snowboarding through them, and then mountain biking, I kind of did on my own, but then I really wanted to share that with the kids. So I started the mountain bike program. Climbing, same thing. I kind of got into it on my own. And then somebody reached out to us, I think it was 2 years ago, to run a climbing program. And at first I wasn't involved. But this year I kind of stepped up and really started to help organizing and coming to all of the events. It's been a really cool journey. And it's amazing to see, the kids that I taught snowboarding 15 years ago when they were 9 years old, and now they're in their 20s and they're having families, and they're now passing that knowledge on to their kids. So their kids are now part of our programs.
Oh, that's unreal.
It's just generations going through this. It's just really amazing to see.
And have you seen a lot of positive turnout, I guess, from the kids who you've worked with and who've come through the program? Definitely.
This year, the mountain biking program, we had 2 of our kids sponsored by a bike company.
Epic.
And get bikes. Every year they're going to get new bikes.
That's unreal.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
And how many kids are in the bike program now?
The Lil'wat Nation bike program, we meet every other week, and there's probably about maybe 10 kids that show up, not all the time. Some days we'll have 2 kids show up, some days we'll have 8.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's awesome though.
Yeah.
Considering that a couple of years ago there wasn't really anybody doing it.
It's the first year that we ran it.
And in addition to all the ILSA stuff, you do stuff with Indigenous Women Outdoors?
Yes.
Which is?
Indigenous Women Outdoors. We're kind of the same idea based around getting more Indigenous women together. And we run a lot of different programming as well. So we have a mountain bike program. We did a hiking program in the past. I run the backcountry ski snowboard program. And yeah, it's more towards getting women, I guess, involved in a leadership role within the outdoor industry. So we do a lot of training, like AST trainings and bike guides we've certified. I think that's like 20 women with their bike guide certification level 1.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just from this last summer? Or
2 summers now.
2 summers now.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah, I ran...
All Indigenous women?
Yep.
From around the sea to sky or beyond?
From anywhere. Yeah, we do have a lot of Indigenous women that are living within the traditional territory of the Squamish and the Lil'wat. So we're not... we don't say like, oh, you're not from here, you can't be a part of our program.
Right.
That would be rude.
Totally.
But
it's just like what's accessible to people here.
It's whoever wants to join can join. We run a lot of social rides. So we open up an Eventbrite. Anybody can register, and we just get Indigenous women. We'll like take over Whistler Blackcomb for a day, and it's awesome to see. Well,
and earlier this year too, I joined you all on a trek. What was that? A partnership between Avcan and MEC?
Yeah.
So the goal is to like put Indigenous women through like avalanche training courses so that they're avalanche savvy, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. So they can go out and safely enter the backcountry in the winter.
Which is such an incredible thing, because not only are like these outdoor sports typically dominated by like quote unquote white people in these spaces, but like for a woman to have like that role is like a really empowering thing, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Like Indigenous women, it's just like a great thing to get going.
Yeah.
And is it still just you and Maya, or do you have others kind of helping out?
We're slowly growing our team. It's Maya, myself, Michelle runs a lot of like kind of our, like she does a lot of the mountain bike program in Squamish. And then Melissa, she does our trail running and our snowshoe programs.
Oh, right. Yeah. Trail running's been a big one this summer.
Yeah, that's been insane. I keep seeing it pop up on our social media. I'm like, another run? Whoa, this is crazy.
You see it pop up on you're not even aware that it's going on.
No.
That's awesome. Maya, for those who are listening or watching who may not be familiar, Maya was the first person who came on and did one of these podcast things with me. And yeah, she started it like ages ago, and for the longest time it was just her, and then I know you joined on, and it's awesome to see it blowing up like it is. Yeah,
she started it as a hiking program within her nation, and she made a Facebook post, I guess it was like 2 years ago now. Oh my gosh. And she was looking for other Indigenous women that were involved in backcountry skiing or snowboarding, and I got tagged in that post because I'm known as the snowboarder within my community. It's kind of funny. And yeah, I reached out to her and we had a meeting, hit it off, and we're like, let's go and do this backcountry program. And yeah, our first year we went at it together. And then the second year, Maya's kind of taken a step back and she's more involved in her language programs. So I stepped up and I took over the whole program last year, and yeah.
It's awesome.
I know.
I guess that kind of brings me to my next set of questions. Here's like, you're known as the snowboarder in your community.
Yeah.
How did you get involved in snowboarding in the first place? Like growing up as a little girl in the Lil'wat Nation.
Being so close to Whistler, my first job was in a coffee shop in Whistler, and I'd see, all the snowboard instructors walking around, and I was like, they're so cool. I want to do that.
The snowboard instructors specifically.
Yes. I know, so nerdy.
Something about those all yellow, or I guess it wasn't yellow.
I think it
was
was
all
like
blue
and orange, like really ugly jackets.
Yeah, you just like the matching like pant jacket combo.
I don't know. So yeah, with my first paycheck, I bought a snowboard. With my second paycheck, I bought boots and bindings. And I had my friend teach me how to snowboard. So she took me to the top of Whistler Mountain. And said, I don't really know how to teach, just watch and do what I do.
No background in it? Like you?
Nothing.
Wow.
She was like, we were 15 years old. And Yeah, I made it all the way down to the village, and we went up Blackcomb Gondola, and I made it almost all the way down to the village. I had a crash, and I broke my wrist the first day.
First day out.
And I have a really crazy high pain tolerance for broken things, I've come to realize. And I was like, oh, no, it's fine. I was walking around the village carrying my snowboard in the broken wrist hand. And,
wow.
My friend, I was like, oh, that kind of hurts. So she convinced me to go to the doctor, and sure enough, broken.
Was it all swollen and immobile?
I don't really remember.
Yeah.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah. And then from then on, you were just...
I was hooked.
Yeah.
I was back up a week later with a cast.
Epic.
My mom probably wasn't very stoked.
Yeah. I mean, because were there many people from your community doing it back then?
I was the only one that I knew of.
The only one?
That's why I got the name the snowboarder.
Right.
Because, yeah, I was constantly hitchhiking between Whistler and Pemberton, and always with my snowboard. And then I started to compete as well. So I got a lot of recognition for that.
What were you competing in?
Half pipe.
Oh, okay.
So I started out as border cross. And
I was going to say, I thought you were border cross.
yeah, I started out with border cross, and then I really, really liked the half pipe, and I was better at that. So I just kind of went towards that. I ended up being invited to the BC freestyle team, so I competed with them for a couple of years.
And this is all before First Nation Snowboard Association?
No, that was the First Nation snowboard team. I think they made it association.
When they were trying to go
10
less
or 15 years ago.
competition-y?
Yeah.
And there's been like a whole iteration and evolution of that.
Yeah.
So prior to the First Nation snowboard team, do you remember like meeting or seeing any other Indigenous people out on the hill?
No.
So like really it was until you found that team.
Yeah.
Which is...
It was crazy. It's crazy to think that, like, and then the first team, I think there were maybe like six members. And yeah, a lot of them were from the Lil'wat Nation, actually. But yeah, I believe I was the only girl. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I was the only girl because we used to stay down in Vancouver at this hotel, and I would always have to get my own room because I was the only girl.
Yeah. It's wild how many people that story is similar with. Like I remember talking to Court and Chelsea and like hearing the same thing. Like they'd never seen another Indigenous person on slope until seeing this.
Yeah. Yeah, and actually I was, somebody just reached out to me because I'm going towards my backcountry guiding certifications, and somebody reached out to me in America, also an Indigenous woman going for her certifications to be a guide.
Really?
Yeah, and
do you know where she's at?
I can't remember, but at the Protect Our Winters Summit, I spoke there, right? And some of the people, they went to the Protect Our Winters Summit in America, and one of them met this lady and was talking about me, and apparently she was almost in tears because she didn't realize that there was another person exactly like her out there.
Oh, that's awesome.
So yeah, she
so
contacted
powerful.
me, and hopefully we can like have good conversations and kind of help each other through the process, because it's a pretty gnarly process.
Right. And you were talking about this a little bit at the summit there, the Protect Our Winter Summit.
Yeah.
Like, what's it like coming up in this like leadership role where you're like inspiring so many young women to be getting into this stuff? Like, are there many options for you to kind of further these kind of career educational pieces and get the certifications or get help with it? Like, because a lot of it's pretty unattainable, you know?
Yeah, it's really hard. And being at that summit it was so good to just meet like-minded people that wanted to help. So I think me speaking there really opened up a lot of opportunities, not just for myself, but for the next generation that's going to be going through this. So yeah, with Indigenous Women Outdoors, I really want to get that programming to go a little bit further, to get more women certified with the AST2. And maybe even eventually, if anybody's interested, going that route of guiding. So the CAA1 and like intro to weather and all of these different paths that you can choose within the avalanche industry.
Oh, I have so many questions to get to. I'm like thinking ahead. I'm going to not jump ahead, but so growing up as the only snowboarder in your community, like, I guess, like, what was that like? Was it difficult at times?
It was very hard. I often felt like I didn't belong, or I was doing something wrong, like, because I wasn't following a more cultural path. I was doing, you know, a white person sport. And I actually got called out on it a couple of times from other nation members. And it was really, really hard for me.
Like aggressively?
Yeah. It was crazy to feel not supported by the nation, by my fellow, you know, band members. And it's definitely changed a lot since the early days. Like I think that was when I was like 17 or 18. Somebody had called me out and basically said I was more white than native. And that really hurt, and that stuck with me for a long time. But now seeing all the kids get involved in these sports and like it's completely changed. There's so much support now that I feel the love, and it's awesome now. But at the start it was hard. But like that's with any career path, I guess. Like it's always going to be hard to start.
Right. And I think now it's like recognized as like a great way for people to build community, and like it's a healthy thing to do, you know?
Yeah.
Especially for like a young person coming up in the world, it's like a great way to kind of assert your independence and feel competent and like, you know, gain that sort of confidence to like fall down and get back up and keep going.
Exactly.
Have you ever had like any of those people from the beginning like reach out and apologize, or anything kind of come full circle there?
No, I don't even remember who they were. They were just kind of randoms on the street that would kind of yell at me. And it was just a really weird time.
And then on the other side of that coin, like, did you ever feel like, or were there ever any moments like as an Indigenous woman snowboarding, like back in the day, where like people within the ski or snowboard industry would say anything or do anything? Like, in the early days, I was not ashamed, but I wouldn't, I guess, actively say that I was Indigenous. And it wasn't until quite recently, actually, that I started to embrace my history and my culture. But it did feel kind of weird sometimes. There were 3 of us that were all part of the BC Freestyle team. And one from the Lil'wat Nation?
No, we were from all different nations. One was Wet'suwet'en, another was from Alert Bay, and then there was me from the Lil'wat Nation. So there were kind of 3 of us. Chelsea McCutcheon, she made the BC team just before I did, and then I think she was on it for maybe a year, and then her life path kind of switched a little bit, so she left. And then the other guy, him and I were like the closest. We were the best friends. Unfortunately, he did pass away very shortly after we both made it to the BC Freestyle team. So that was a really, really hard hit for me, losing my only other Indigenous friend at that level of snowboarding.
Right. It takes a lot to kind of continue on and persevere.
Yeah.
Were there any big turning points or events that like, you know, something would happen and it would like reassure you that you were on the right path, or like any that stand out? Because I can imagine like experiencing all that like on both sides, feeling like the only one in the sports world doing something that you love, and then also feeling like the animosity from within your band. It would have been really difficult. Like, were there any moments where you like something happened or you like made an impact and felt like, okay, like this is worth it. This is where I want to continue putting my energy and time?
I think the starting of Indigenous Women Outdoors was a really big turning point in my life, where I could finally make a career path in the sports industry. And it was really awesome to be able to do that. But more recently, actually, is the 2 boys that got signed on with the bikes.
Right.
Like, I had parents coming up to me and congratulating me and like all the work that I do. And they're so excited for what's to come for the kids in our programs. And we're going to do it again this winter. I've found 2 really good skiers. I'm like, all right, let's do a project together.
Do those kids have ski sponsors or anything?
No.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah. That's huge, though.
Yeah.
I mean, and I imagine to the rest of their peers in those programs, like those kids are just idolized and...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now those kids are constantly posting photos of their bikes, and, you know, it's awesome to see. They're so stoked. They've never had good bikes before. Like when they showed up for the photo shoot for Deep Summer, they didn't have bikes. We had to find rentals, and they were on a different bike every single day of the shoot. So 3 days, 3 different bikes. And yeah, we were lucky to have a few of our partners kind of step up and donate bikes, or Pro Rider even donated his bike for a couple of days. Like it was really cool to see the bike industry step up and really support our cause. Yeah, we ended up raising so much money to run more programming, and we're now using that. We ran a dirt jump program yesterday, and another one on Thursday. So
that's epic.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, like growing up, you say like you didn't feel until like the start of Indigenous Women Outdoors that you could have a career path here, but that was only like a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So you've been going like over a decade now, just
kind of instructing snowboarding for Whistler Blackcomb.
At the POW Summit, you had a story about like getting a ride home with a guide.
Yes.
Would you like to share that?
Yeah. So I think it was probably 10 years ago that I did my AST1, and I was hitchhiking back and forth between Whistler and Mount Currie.
And you're a snowboarder, just to
snowboarder,
clarify.
yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, this guy picked me up. He was a guide, a full ACMG guide. I don't know who it was because it was a long time ago, and just no memory of who he was. But I had told him that I was in the AST1, and he was like, "Oh, what do you eventually want to do with that?" And I was like, "Well, maybe I want to be a splitboard guide." And he's like, "Oh, you're splitboarder? No, it's probably not going to happen." And I just lost all hope right there. And I stopped that idea that maybe I could be a guide for like 8 years. And then with Indigenous Women Outdoors, I was like, oh, we do need leaders within that industry. Maybe I could do that again. And then seeing Christine Falecki as a female splitboard guide, I was like, oh, there's hope. So I started back up again.
And you were kind of derailed all because of one thing some guy said in the car in passing.
Crazy, hey?
I know. Well, the funny thing about that is that he's probably just like a nobody, maybe.
Yeah.
Like hanging out in Pemby now.
Who knows?
Yeah, he's not having nearly as big of an impact as you. So
yeah,
don't let it get you down. What's it like coming from that place? Like growing up and then now getting opportunities to be a Protector Winners Ambassador, to be getting all these opportunities to become like a leader and getting things kind of like not given to you because you've definitely like worked for it and earned it, but like becoming this kind of like icon in a sense for other Indigenous people and women and everybody in this world kind of coming out. Like,
it's so crazy. I never thought, especially at the age that I am, to start a snowboard career. And like,
it's budding at that.
Like, yeah, I'm like, where was this like 10, 15 years ago when I was competing in halfpipe? But I'm happy it's finally happening. And I can't believe how far I've come in just the 2 years. And that's basically like my meeting with Marie Francois. It was the start of it, I think.
For what was that for? For that project we shot a couple years ago?
No, we met up because she was looking for an Indigenous splitboarder within the Lil'wat Nation to help her and another guide friend of ours with a little bit of like a program, like an overnight camp, and then I would come in and talk a little bit about culture. And that was kind of like, I'm a splitboarder. I don't know a lot about my culture though. And so I was like, maybe I do want to learn more though. So I started that journey of learning, and it's been really awesome to see, like just to be progressing in the snowboard world, but also in my cultural learning. And bringing the two together has been really fulfilling for me. And that was all because of that one meeting.
And how has that cultural journey gone about? Like what sort of things have you embarked in?
I did take a language class. Mm-hmm. I would like to further, I'd like to join more of those language classes, but it's really hard because with all the work that I'm doing now with IWO and ILSA, it's kind of like I'm learning on my own time now. I do have all the books and I do try to learn as much as I can. And I'm also on Indigenous Inherent Rights youth program right now. So I'm learning about, decolonizing, like how we kind of run things and governance and stuff, which is awesome. But also like for my culture, that language class it's not like a traditional, when we learn French, I am, he is, she is.
Right.
You're meeting with elders and talking, and you're just like, you go over vocabulary lists. Yeah. But it's more like talking, and also through stories. So we read a lot of our stories, and in those stories, there's our language, and that's how we learn the language. And I really liked hearing our stories and actually connecting them to the places that I ski or snowboard or mountain bike. And just getting those two together has been really fun. And it makes me want to learn more of my culture, because I go up the Duffy, and I'm like, oh, that mountain over there, what's that called in our language? What's the place name? What's the story behind that? So I come back out of the backcountry with more knowledge than I went in with, and it's so much fun and awesome.
Are there many resources for that, for like learning those names and stuff? Because a lot of it's like what Maya's doing with Squamish language. It's like you have to immerse yourself in it. It's not like you can just like, it's not like there's a Duolingo. Is that the app? You know, like you can't just like.
We actually do have one
for Lil'wat.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. That's First Voices. So
First Voices, right?
Yeah. Every once in a while, like if I want to know a word in our language, I just search it, and sometimes it pops up. Sometimes it's not there, but yeah, we do have an app.
Yeah. Is it an actual app, or is it just a website?
It's an app.
Oh, killer.
Yeah.
I'm going to download that.
There's so many languages on it too.
Right.
So no matter where you are in Canada, I guess, you can like go on the Native Lands app, find out whose territory you're on, and then go onto the First Voices website and learn how to say hi.
And I'm pretty sure First Voices has a lot of stuff in the States as well.
Oh, do they?
I think it's kind of all Turtle Island.
Oh,
because
okay.
I remember looking up stuff a while ago, and I know they have like, a lot of different stuff from Washington as well, like kind of Chinook.
Yeah.
Which is awesome. Great resource.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But I mean, like what Maya and I had talked about before, kind of like what you're talking about now, like the language, though, it's not something that directly translates to English. So in a way, it like shapes the way that you think and perceive the world around you.
Yeah.
So like to really like learn to speak those stories with like elders and stuff, like you have to just like immerse yourself in like a totally different kind of mindset of perceiving the world.
Yeah, definitely.
How does that affect or add to your experience being outside?
It connects you more to the area that you're in, to the land that you're on, because you have that deeper respect for it. It's not just looking at a mountain being like, it's a mountain. It's a spirit. It has a spirit. It's a living thing. And once you can, I guess, digest that, you feel so much better about being out there, and like asking permission for the mountain to be there, asking for safe passage. It's pretty cool.
Do you do that every time you go out? Kind of have a ritual now?
Yeah, I started like before I drop into a bigger line, I will definitely thank the Creator, thank Mother Earth, ask permission for a safe passage, and I'll leave a part of me out there. So usually like a piece of hair, or what we did in the Lil'wat Nation was actually offer water. So, yeah.
Because water is kind of
water is life.
Water is life, yeah. That concept alone is pretty different from like the way that a lot of this action sports world looks at things, like in kind of classic Western thinking, mountains are like things to conquer, things to test yourself on and grow as like an individual in this kind of like egotistical drive to like do more and more. Have you had like, when you started learning the culture bit, was there a moment when you started like kind of realizing this whole other perception of like the world around you, and like has that had like a really big impact on the way that you embark on those sports?
Yeah, I definitely feel more open to all of my senses, and like trying to find the message that is being sent to me from, say, like the rock that I'm climbing or the mountain that I'm skiing. I keep saying skiing. I'm a snowboarder.
It's just a verb.
Yeah, I know.
Ripping, shredding.
Yes.
Well, I'm out there shredding. But yeah, it like connects you to the land in a much deeper way, and it's so much more beyond just like the self.
Yeah.
Like especially with rock climbing, I find that's, I guess with all these sports really, but maybe to me, because I'm not too into rock climbing, so like I see it like idolized with guys like Alex Honnold and like people who are out there like, epitomizing this like self battle. It's like they're competing against their self, and it's like all about, again, like the ego trying to climb something and do it better, harder, like versus like having this connection to the land and viewing these things as beings, as entities. Like it's got to be just like such a more wholesome, fulfilling connection.
I love being out there and feeling, I'm on top of a mountain, but feeling that we are together. In the Lil'wat language, we have a saying, "Pelpalawi i'uhumihua mutatitmihua," which means the people and the land are one. So you can't have one without the other, kind of. So even our language, uhumiuch, or people, is uhumiuch, and that is like a mix of people and land. So our language, our word for land is timiuch. So if you kind of cut that word in half, uhumiuch, it's that miuch part, land. And then uhumiuch is people, land.
Human land.
Yeah. Human land.
Yeah. Well, that's like people of the land versus land.
Yeah. It's kind of like hard to describe because, it's like Maya says, you can't really translate our languages because they don't translate to English.
And how, like, on a scale of like 1 to fluent, and like how far along?
I am not. I can say a few sentences, and I know, words for different plants or animals, but yeah, it's hard to put sentences together because like the words change. It's not like English where the word has that meaning. If it's gonna, like, if you put it in our language, if you put a sentence together, the ending of the words changes. It's kind of confusing. So that's what I want to learn next, is how to make my own sentences.
Well, I remember, because I've been so incredibly fortunate to be able to spend time with both you and Maya, like out around these mountains for various projects and things. I remember the one when we were up on Unchkai, up here, like up on the saddle there, like, talking about like all the different words for snow each language has, and like you two being able to share your stories. Like that's a bit of the connection that is like so cool or unique, especially from like a Western settler perspective. Like when you're out on the Duffy, like there's like this connection between human being and land, like you're talking about, but also like ancestors. Like you have like stories of like from your family, like out on those lands. It's like this connection that like no settler will ever have to these lands,
Yeah. I was actually on a photo shoot about a month ago in the very area where my name comes from. My name Isha. It's actually in a story that is published in a book called The Lil'wat World of Charlie Mack. So my name and the person I got my name from is in that book, and it was in the exact area of where the story took place. So I felt like extra special being out there because I'm named after this area.
Wow.
Yeah.
Would you care to share the story? Or summarize it if you can remember it? Yeah.
So Isha, she didn't have use of her legs, and her spirit power was the eagle. So every spring or summer, the village would move up into the Miller kind of bench area in the Pemberton Valley, and she would just be like, "Oh, leave me here. I'll meet you guys up there." And so the whole village would leave her. And once they were gone and out of sight, she would call upon her spirit power, which was the eagle. And so 2 eagles would come and lift her up and bring her to the top of the mountain and drop her off so she would get there before the village people. And same thing when she had to come down the mountain, the village people would leave her. And she'd call upon the eagles and they'd lift her up and bring her back down to the valley.
And what mountain area is this? What region?
Like the Miller area of the Pemberton Valley. So it's like halfway up the Pemberton Valley towards the Huat Glacier is what we call the Lil'wat Glacier. And it's just on the left side there, the Miller Bench.
Yeah. And so you being up there, what was that for? Was that a biking thing?
Yeah, it was a bike photo shoot.
Yeah. That would be pretty powerful.
It was awesome.
Yeah. Because let's see, when we were out, where were we? It was Steep Creek. So there's the cabin across the way that like your great grandpa helped build.
Yeah.
And then you had stories about I haven't thought about this or refreshed it in a while, but so maybe you could help refresh my memory here.
Avalanche rescue.
There's the avalanche rescue, but then like within that, there's all sorts of like traditional wisdom and knowledge that like we could apply in like our modern world. Like I remember you talking about looking at the way that the wind was blowing off the Duffy off
Tizil. So
which
when
is
you're
Mount Curry.
yeah. So yeah, these two trappers or hunters, they wanted to go up the Duffy, and one of our elders was looking at Tizil and noticed the winds were carrying snow, and he said that they shouldn't go because it was unsafe because of avalanches, because of what he saw happening on Tizil. So that's knowing that, you know, the winds are blowing and carrying snow and in a certain direction. And what happened, they went anyways. And unfortunately, they did get caught in an avalanche and they passed. But the whole community, so it's more a story of community, but there is a lot of knowledge in there as well. So they were, you know, they understood the avalanche danger was high because of the winds. When they went searching for them, they were using like saplings as probing sticks to find them. But yeah, so there's a lot of the things that we do in the backcountry now is in that story, which is really cool. But it's more a story about community and the Lil'wat Nation coming together to bring these two men home. So the whole of Mount Curry goes up to, they call it the Big Log Cabin, but it's just big logs in a small cabin. and
why is it called the Big Log Cabin? Or Big Log? Because
it's made of big logs, but it's a small cabin. So it's the Big Log
But isn't
cabin.
the area because like the lake would dam all the logs? Isn't that why?
No, that's Tuck.
Oh.
So Tuck is log jam, and that's the Duffy Lake.
Okay.
Yeah, because of
these
the
all
log
mixed
jam
up.
at the far end of the lake. Right. No, the cabin, I don't know where they got the logs from. They just call it the Big Log Cabin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they would all go up there and...
Yeah, they all went up there.
Banded together.
And yeah, the whole community basically brought these two men home. And as a community now, we still do that very same thing. We come together when a family is in need, and we help support each other.
Mm-hmm. So it's like kind of a unifying story within the community.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's such a reoccurring thing that I feel like that we as a society, this society here, are kind of learning, is that like, you know, there's all this like quote unquote Western science or ways of doing things, ways of traversing avalanche terrain, having your beacon shovel probe, all this stuff. And then the more you kind of like look into indigenous like knowledge and wisdom, you find that like these are very cyclical stories or cyclical things that have happened. Like this knowledge isn't anything new. It's just like Western quote unquote white people have like found a way to like make it their own, make it new, and create all sorts of like judging criteria to be certified in it. Yeah.
Well, indigenous people were like the most knowledgeable in their territories. So like, and that's just generations and generations of, you know, looking at things and understanding them and then making stories and telling them to the next generation. And that's how we learned, was through stories. It was the oral history. So a lot of that knowledge was passed on through stories.
And you have a traverse in mind that you've you've been planning based on some of those stories. Would you care to talk about that?
Yeah, I want to do, I think it's a 108 kilometer traverse over the Huat Glacier.
Decent.
The glacier itself isn't 108 kilometers. It's like a one-day travel, but just to get to the glacier, it's the way the Lil'wat Nation connected to the Shuswap people on the coast. So, and there are lots of stories about the route. So,
these are like stories passed down through
through they're hundreds of years old, these stories,
right? But verbally passed down. They're not written or recorded.
No,
right?
Well, recently written down, but before it was just passed down through story. And they describe, you know, where you climb up to the glacier, what route you take on the glacier based on the mountains around, and then when you get off of the glacier, there's stories of there's faces carved into trees that point in the direction of the path. That, you know, they're really old faces that have been carved a long time ago. I've seen pictures of them. They exist.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I want to go and find those and just retrace that entire journey the way that they used to do it.
Yeah. And there's something about like talking about certain sections of the trail being like starting in the dark and ending in the dark, which is a long day, so you know what happens in the spring.
Yeah. So yeah, it's starting when the stars are still out and you finish when the stars come back out. So it's a long day of travel, but you wouldn't sleep on the glacier because that was really dangerous. Like you don't know if you're on a crevasse. So yeah, you would always try to follow that story exactly to the timing so that you would get that trip done in one day because you didn't want to spend the time on the glacier.
Right. And since the days are longer in the spring, like you see, so like I guess from those stories you're able to like deduce which time of year is best for travel and to do these things.
Yeah. And then it's also, the snow bridges are still there. And
right.
Yeah.
Sounds like such a fun thing.
It's going to be really cool.
You've been planning that for a while.
Yeah, a couple of years.
Because I remember talking about that a while ago, so it's nice to see that still in the works.
Yeah. Eventually.
You've got a lot of things in the works right now.
I know. I never saw myself as a director or a producer, but here we go.
Would you like to share any about that, or maybe keep that under wraps? Or
I don't know. I'm just
going with it.
Just going with it. After being in fabric, I was kind of like, oh, now what? It's kind of over. So I'm just making my own opportunities now.
I mean, that's what it's all about, really.
Yeah. And then also just trying to get those opportunities out to the youth in my community. So involving them in the film process too.
I can't even imagine how inspiring it must be for you to kind of see those kids coming up now and having opportunities and getting sponsored at 15 and 17 years old.
So amazing. Yeah. I was trying to do that snowboarding when I was like 17, 18 years old.
What, I guess, is like your vision for the future with all this work that you're doing? Like, what do you hope to kind of create from all this?
I just want to see kids outside having fun. That's it. That's all I want. I grew up doing that myself, and I had, such a great time. And I just want to share that with the youth that are there now. Like, you can make a career out of this if you want. Yeah.
Opening up opportunity.
Yeah.
What does the term reconciliation mean to you?
I guess it's just decolonizing the structures that we have in our society and being more understanding and receptive to Indigenous knowledge. It's because you can't fight things like, climate action with just science. Having Indigenous knowledge, having those other worldviews, you're going to have so much more information to go on and to find a solution. So just opening up, accepting that we do know what we're talking about as Indigenous people, and our stories do have meanings.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's kind of like a thing, like especially with an issue as big and broad as climate change, it's kind of arrogant to assume that the same system that created climate change is also going to be the source of the solutions.
Yeah, exactly.
So like terms though, like land back or decolonization tend to be really triggering, especially to people in power or people who, own land. Like, what does that kind of mean to you? And like, what do those terms kind of like, what do you hope to, how am I saying this? What do those terms mean to you? And like, how can like allies or co-conspirators kind of help further those ideas along? And like, what kind of world does that create?
Yeah, land back is a big one that it sounds like really scary. Like, oh, my farm, I have to give up my farm now? What? It's not about your land. It's about what is happening on the land and having more Indigenous people involved in decision making at a higher level. So I was actually a part of a visitor use management committee for a park in my area, the Tanquil Lake Park. And it was one of the first times that the nation has been invited to the meeting with parks, the BC Parks and the Pemberton Valley Trails Association, and like all working together to form a visitor use management plan that made everybody happy. And it's pretty new work that's been going on. And I hear it's being done in a few other nations, a few areas in Canada as well. So it's not just about, giving the land back. It's having Indigenous input on what's happening on the land.
Well, representation and then consent.
Yeah.
That's the first time it's happened in that area since.
I think they were working.
BC Park's like 150 years old.
I know. I think they were working together for Joffrey. I think this was the biggest one, and I think they're doing one for Semaphore Lakes as well. And like a lot of the parks, they're starting to come around and include the Indigenous people in decision making.
Right. So it's less about like giving the physical land back, but more about including stakeholders and representatives in decisions on like the broader land base.
Yes.
How is that like impacting like different industries, I guess, like over there, like when it comes to things like mining and logging and these long established kind of industries, like especially within the Lil'wat community? Is there much progress being made there? Or?
Lil'wat Nation does a lot of logging, actually.
The nation has their own.
Yeah, Lil'wat Forestry Ventures.
You have a spider on your cheek, I believe. Little jumping. Yeah, you just touched it, but it stayed there. One of those little jumping spiders. It's not a big scary spider. You're fine.
Is he gone?
Yeah, he's on your shirt now. Look at him jumping away.
Whoa. Hey, buddy. Go jump over there.
Not to freak you out with the phrase, you have a spider on your face, but...
He's gone. He's safe. He's on the ground.
Or she.
Or she.
Whatever. They. Yeah. Whatever they identify as. Yeah. So, sorry, Lil'wat has a lot of logging.
Yeah. So, the Lil'wat Nation, and that kind of funds a lot of our community's programs, which is awesome. But sorry, what was the question? I'm like kind of freaked out by the spider.
Right. Sorry. I guess I was just asking, like, how does that concept of quote unquote land back, again, getting representation and consent from Indigenous nations, how does that translate to working with really big industries that have been like so long established in BC, like logging or mining?
I'm sure it terrifies them, because a lot of Indigenous people aren't about mass resource extraction. They want to protect the lands, protect the waters, because that's our livelihood. Our fishing, our hunting, our everything comes from the land. So yeah, like big resource extraction is not really big for our communities. So it's probably really scary for them.
Right. And I know it's like really sad to see, but it can be so divisive throughout many communities.
Yeah.
I don't want to name any specific names or even nation stories, but like I've seen from people I've known and talked to where like part of the nation is for it because it provides some bit of funding for schools or clean drinking water, any of the stuff, and then others are against it because it goes against traditional kind of methods of operating. So it's like this crux where like it's no good situation, but ultimately like the industry is kind of working on a globalized market or like globalized scale where it's like you kind of have to do these things at like mass scale in order to make them profitable.
Yeah.
So it's like where do you draw the line? How do you do a little bit and do it in a way that's better, you know?
Yeah, it's hard, and that's going to happen in every community too. It's happening in my community with logging, actually. Like a lot of community members are for it, a lot of community members are against it. And I think it's just, decolonizing the way we are as well as a nation, because those colonial structures were adopted into our nations for the most part, and having to do our work on our end to decolonize our government systems as well. Like it's not just, settlers that need to decolonize. Indigenous people need to like think about that too, because
the framework they're operating in. Yeah.
It's very much based on colonial systems. Chief and council.
Right. Yeah. Which were colonial.
Council.
Exactly. Yeah. Like elected councils versus hereditary councils.
Yeah.
And I mean, with logging especially, I'm definitely more familiar with that one, but it's this kind of seedy thing where the government is like giving control to like nations to decide how and where to log, but then even those decisions aren't necessarily fully autonomous like within the nations, because it's all dictated by like having to have minimum cut requirements that go to keep mills like in operation. So you have like this kind of situation where you almost just like break up a big logging conglomerate and give it to the nations, but you still have to cut a certain amount of wood, which is only made fiscally feasible or like financially profitable if you do it a certain way, which is more than likely clear cutting. So it's still kind of being dictated by BC timber sales and how much wood is cut. And it's not like these nations are fully empowered to do it how they would actually want to do it.
Yeah.
Just a big convoluted mess.
Yeah, it is.
As an Indigenous person, like, what are your kind of, like, if you had guidelines for consent, like, what does that look like? You had a really great quote at the POW Summit.
Oh, did I?
Yeah. Something about no answer is an answer.
Oh, yeah. No answer is an answer. It's usually no. So you have to go back and rethink what you've proposed to the nation to make it so they do want to give you an answer. I've had it done to me within my nation as well. Like, I've emailed the people that I needed to contact for a project that I was working on, and I didn't get an answer. And I was like, oh, all right, that's no. But I knew right away, like, okay, they're not answering. Like, the nations, they're so busy with their own thing, their own communities. Sometimes they just don't have time to answer you for something that's not important to them. So with any kind of action, like guidelines as like a outsider or somebody trying to work with nations, like looking for consent for a development or like a trail or something, like anything, like what would you suggest? Actually, PORCA, the Pemberton Off-Road Cycling Association, has a really good story about this, because they're trying to get more trails, because Pemberton, everybody knows, is basically the hardest place to learn how to mountain bike. So I actually have to take the kids to Whistler to learn before they can ride Pemberton trails.
Because there's just
because we don't have green trails.
Yeah.
And even our blue trails are pretty hard.
It's dusty, it's dry, it's steep, it's rocky.
Yeah, so PORCA has been, constantly like requesting new trails, and the nation just keeps saying no, and they go back and they're like, okay, well, let's rethink this. Maybe we'll put it here, go back to the nation. And yeah, it's just a lot of like kind of going back and forth, and finally maybe like inviting somebody from the nation to be a part of that decision-making process. And I have a feeling that eventually there's a couple of us that might be the people that would be involved in that decision making. But I'm not really sure. I'm like, I don't want to go too much into that because it's pretty touchy. Mountain bike trails.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
As they are.
Yeah.
But so there's like avenue, and like people are kind of following that direction and like getting things done.
Yeah. So they're accepting that no is the answer, and just going back and rethinking their plans and rethinking like how they're going to approach the nation. And I think a lot of it was PORCA has funded some programming for Indigenous Women Outdoors. Last year we ran a program, and just growing mountain biking within the community is going to help better that connection between the mountain bike industry or the mountain bike community of Pemberton and the Lil'wat Nation.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that recreation is an extractive resource?
It depends on the sport, I guess, because mountain bike trails, they do disturb the forest floor. You're cutting through things. They try to build them as sustainably as possible, but they still are, rerouting the water where it was going, and things like that. So mountain biking it's a hard one for me, because I understand why nation members are angry at bike trails. Whereas, skiing and snowboarding, you're on top of the snow. You're not harming anything really, because it just melts and the forest grows.
What about from a community aspect?
How so?
Or just like towns. I mean, I find Squamish to be a great example of that. Like, there's a lot of rampant development, and a lot of people, like climbing is pretty like non-impactful on the rock, but like, could you say that like the culture of climbing around here is extracting something from the community?
Yeah, I think all sports kind of do, and it's how the people represent themselves in that sport, and that has a big impact on how the nation sees these sports. So, for example, like people touring up the Duffy. they're speeding through our town and putting our kids, our dogs, our animals at risk. They're not showing the respect that they should be. And so the nation sees these ski tours, backcountry enthusiasts as kind of like a virus. So they're just coming and into our town and disrupting things, and they're not doing it in a good way. So I've done a lot of work to try to educate within the industry of, you know, the right way to approach Indigenous communities and get through Indigenous communities and how they can help our nations and our people, rather than just coming through and, you know, using our territory as a playground.
That's what I mean, like kind of like an extractive resource in a way. Like you're using it for your own fun and personal enjoyment, but you're not like giving back to the communities or supporting those communities.
Yeah, and that's why a lot of bike trails have been closing down. Bike trails that are going through Indigenous communities, the communities have had enough. And yeah, enough is enough. We're going to close this trail down.
Bike trails that were like unsanctioned to begin with, that didn't ask for permission to go through.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because on the flip side of that, like I can imagine a lot of the people going up the Duffy ski touring are probably like just stereotyping for sure, but like, you know, very granola-y, like at one with nature, connected to it. They're like, you know, there's a reason you're ski touring and not like sledding or riding Whistler, you know?
Yeah, there's a funny story about that actually. My partner, he climbed Joffrey Peak to fly off. He's a speed flyer, and at the peak he finds vegan beef jerky wrapper, and he's like, "What is this doing up here?"
Right.
Who I thought, not to stereotype vegans or anything, but he's like, "What? Where's this garbage coming from? Vegans are supposed to care for the planet."
Right. You care enough to eat vegan snacks that replicate beef jerky, and then you're still leaving your trash at the peak.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. There's a big disconnect there. It's odd how that happens. Yeah, we just went camping out the Idaho last night, and it was, my God, there was like a rave going on, some like Burning Man mock-up thing until like 4 a.m. And it was just like, I just wanted to get away from people and like have a quiet night in nature, and everybody's out there for the same thing, you know, to like be somewhere like beautiful and quote unquote untouched and like along the river, but then you're just bringing out all your terrible music. Like they had a legit like scaffolding with like speakers and stuff built up.
No.
We were just like, what have we gotten into?
Don't you just hate it when you go out in nature and other people have the nerve to go out in nature too?
Well, or like, I guess it's not going out in nature, but it's like bringing their own.
They're bringing the city with them.
I was driving on the highway and I saw an ad for a music-free campground. And at the time I was like, oh, that's an interesting thing to advertise. And after last night, I'm like, I get it.
Yeah.
Like, nobody wants to hear other people's music blasting like across the campground.
Yeah, I've camped up at Refuse Creek up the Memquem.
Yeah.
And, you know, we're going out to get outside and get into nature, and I had the same thing happen to me. Full rave going on just down the road. We're like, what?
I know, it's so disrespectful.
It was in the campsite actually. Yeah, full rave in the campsite. We were like, all right, well.
Yeah. Interesting. Nothing more to say about that.
No.
I feel like I'm getting cynical here. So, I feel like I already asked you this, but I'll kind of re-ask you, rephrase it. But what do you think that people in these communities, allies, co-conspirators, people can do to help reinforce ideas of consent with Indigenous people and kind of uplift these nations or individuals to be included?
I think just doing it on your own and like so people can see, that person's doing the work. I can do the work too. And you know, not necessarily having to educate people, but if you're doing it, someone's looking at you and they're going to replicate that. So the more people start to get into that mindset of, helping the Indigenous communities because, I'm on their territory, and getting involved in organizations like Indigenous Life Sport Academy or Indigenous Women Outdoors. And that gives back to our communities because our programs are for our communities.
Mm-hmm. Getting involved in was a great word choice there, because it's more than just like giving your monetary support. It's like all these nations need people to kind of step in. Sorry, not all these nations. All these programs need people to step in and help.
Yeah. So a great example is our climbing program. You know, it's we have, you know, a bunch of kids. We need people to belay. So joining us, like reaching out to us and saying, hey, do you need some help belaying on this day? Or bike guides for my bike program. It's all volunteer. And yeah, it's just people stepping up and wanting to be a part of the change and be a role model to these youth. And now we actually have mainly Indigenous bike guides for our youth program, which is awesome. Which is great, but that wouldn't have been able to come without the like volunteer ability of somebody else. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Any places where people can go to learn more information, or if they do have a skill set they'd like to share and donate, like where can they go? I would say our social media, but I've seen that inbox. Right. And it's pretty massive. Usually people will try to reach out to our social media, but you know, figure out who's running the program and reach out directly to that person. And that's all on our websites. So yeah, you'll see it in the ILSA website, our crew, and it lists me as the climber and mountain biker. And then on IWO, it lists me as the backcountry. So yeah, reach out to me. Eey, that's scary. Yeah, you're inviting everybody. Maybe not. And what's your public phone number? Your email address? Yeah, because our email addresses are on our website. Right. Yeah. Okay. Because you guys are all so busy. Yeah. Yeah, and again, if you don't receive an answer, it's an answer. Yeah, we get really, really busy. So, yeah, apologize in advance to anybody who does reach out or who has reached out and didn't receive an answer. We're just a few of us running this huge organization. I don't even know when this started to be big, but it's massive now. Maybe send a follow-up email. Yeah. 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 Usually if I get a couple, then okay, this person's real serious. Right. Yeah. Anything else you'd like to add or share? No, I feel like we talked about a lot. All right. Just stuff. Yeah. Thanks so much for conversation. Totally. Always. Always great to have you, or always great to chat with you, but great we finally were able to do it in this format here. Yeah, this has been cool. Yeah. Sweet. Thank you so much. No worries. Thanks for having me. Well, thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the Nerdy About Nature podcast. As always, if you've enjoyed this podcast and all the fun educational videos I have all over social media, you can help support their production by becoming a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/nerdyAboutNature for $1 a month or more. All that goes into giving me the financial stability to keep doing all this fun stuff that you're enjoying so much. So if you want to support it, that'd be great. And if not, no worries. Just stoked you're here. And until next time, I'll catch you all later.